Perfect, thank you. All right. So yeah, this paper's titled Uncharted Territories, Developing Digital Experiences for Anthropological and Archaeological Exploration. And I'm Kristin Carlson. So this is a little bit of this paper talks a little bit of about an umbrella project that's exploring anthropological and archaeological data from the Darien region of Panama, which is often called the Darien Gap. I and a variety of colleagues at Illinois State have been collaborating with Lucy Gill, who is a PhD candidate at UC Berkeley, in order to help bring the stories that her data tells to life. And so our goals are to create educational and engaging works that are accessible, especially to the local people of Darien, as well as everyone else. We specifically have looked at how people in Darien use technology. And most people there have smartphones, but don't have home computers. Cellular data is really prominent, but Wi-Fi is not. Lucy jokes a lot that the cell data in the Darien is better than she can get in San Francisco often. And so in making kind of media works that leverage all this data, we've been trying to really make sure that we're making it accessible to the people there, which means doing things in both English and Spanish, trying to use really small sizes and acknowledge that streaming and optimizing files as much as possible is really important. So some interesting things about this area is that most contemporary media articles really focus on the remoteness and danger of the province. However, it's not uncharted by any means in today's terms. It's had a very vibrant history, which includes occupation by multiple indigenous groups, the Kuna and Embera Wunan, a Spanish settlement for 300 years, the oldest free Black settlement in the Americas, and many other longstanding Afro-descendant communities, including Scotland's only ever colonization effort that was very short-lived, and hence the reason for their only one. And logging was so prevalent by the 1920s that it was noted that the biodiversity in the area was probably the most studied in all of the Americas. So one issue here is that we have lots of information about the colonizers of the area and the biodiversity, but very little about the actual people that are living there. The other important feature of this is the Pan American Highway was explored in detail for many decades. And you can kind of see here this road that ends at Yavitsa. So it's called the Darien Gap because the Pan American Highway has stops here and then picks up again in Colombia. But it's the only place that the road does not exist, because otherwise you could drive from Alaska all the way down through Patagonia. And so that was halted out of ecological and agricultural concerns, but specifically due to protests from the many indigenous groups of the area. And so this Digital Darien project is focused on developing these digital tools for sharing experiences through storytelling with digital media. And the stories and data sets that we're using were collected by Lucy Gill, who had been doing in-person field work until the pandemic. But since COVID, we've had to switch gears, and she's been focusing more on how to do kind of remote crowdsourced data collection. And her work is really focused on the ecological history of the region, which is also because of the indigenous groups that are there. These, by being able to show more of the ecological history, that helps them have the legal cases in order to get back to their land. So there's all kinds of interesting perspectives to this. And so our goal of this collaboration was really to look at new ways of kind of communicating these stories that she's coming across, particularly of how she's working with community partners, illustrate the information of the area and the anthropological work that's being done to show the history of this area. And this is an image of like her ArcGIS data at the moment. So I'll show a variety of the projects we've been working on shortly here, but one of the things we've come across is that we're constantly coming across new information. New species are discovered like every few months here. There's new conversations with people. the information that arises or academic articles that are published change all the time. It was only within the last 5 years, I think, that articles about the people of the area were even published in academic circles. And then also this media perspective is important. You know, there was a large newspaper story in the last year about how migrants try to cross the Darien Gap, and it's the most dangerous place in the world, which is damaging to that location. So we want to make sure that we're supporting a narrative that illustrates the history, culture, and lives of the region, instead of the media's perspective of this being this remote, pristine, or primitive location that's damaging to the communities there. So we're working to continually iterate our media works to ensure that they're accurate and supportive, and plan to continue this as long as possible. This might be a little unreasonable to do forever, but we're hoping that as long as we can. And we've already been, iterating works many times. So the current works that we have 3 videos. We'll look at 2 of them today. And then we've been working on a game as well that gives a little bit more of an engaging process that that shows how anthropological and archaeological information is gathered and what is impacted on the community. And then we've also been working on helping to develop a data collection tool for remote community-based participatory research. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'm going to just show a minute of this first video, which is on people of Darien, which is exploring the diversity of people in the region. And so the first few versions of this video focused mostly on the Spanish explorers who dominated the area for 300 years, as well as the recent news stories of migrants, because that's what we had. But as we were gathering additional information about the Afro-descendant communities and many people of Asian descent that relocated due to work on the Panama Canal or the logging industry, in the wave of Hispanic people with the expansion of the Pan American Highway, we made multiple iterations in order to include all of that information. So here's a second video. And this, it's called The Mullah of Mogo, highlights an archaeologist's trip to the village of Mogo to see a unique rock that's known for its carvings. And this is something that locals had known about for centuries, but had not been shared with academic sources until this time.
On the second day, June 30th, the team met Antonio, their 16-year-old guide. Antonio brought them to the rock and showed the team what evidence local residents had found. Local residents had found many ceramic pieces and noted that they were parts of large water jars from long ago. Stone arrowheads had also been found, indicating the residents' hunting practices, along with many stone tools. The team continued on to explore the stone boulder, the big rock, as residents call it. The rock has been carved with many deep swirling strokes. The Embera, people in Mogo call it, La Mola, which is the name for contemporary cuna designs that look similar but are usually made of fabric. In contemporary crafts, the cuna people create baskets and fabric with the curvy and geometric shapes using bright colors. While Lucy and her team were the first archaeologists to document La Mola, it had been known to the local community for a long time. While at the rock, Lucy and her team collected many samples and photos to gain a critical understanding of the data and to create a subset for future research. Finally, they slept near where the ocean
and so this is one video that has not required any iterations at this point, mostly because we're telling the story of what Lucy was already working on. And but she does have plans to go back. And so next time, if she finds more information, then we may be revising this one as well. So while video has been helping us to kind of illustrate specific facts and stories from the data, we also wanted to provide a more engaging platform to show the experience of how to explore this region. So we've been developing a game called Tracking Darien that's following Lucy on her latest trip again. But part of this is that the last anthropologist that visited the area was a Swedish PhD student doing his dissertation in 1929. And so during this time, he had visited 7 different sites and found artifacts. And so Lucy, being a PhD student going there, that was the first thing she was doing, right? You pick up the last work of your predecessors and then you try and follow it. And so she was able to find 6 of those 7 sites by following his notes. And but what she's doing differently this time is collaborating with the indigenous and the Afro-descendant community members in order to work with them to construct a different picture of the diversity and history of the area, as well as noting a lot more of the biodiversity as well. So this is an example of the interface that gives Linné's notebook information alongside Lucy's images. And I have a little video of the game here. Right, and so in this, the player begins by reading the introduction to the game, sees some current historical information, and then begins exploring the first of the 6 sites that Linné has previously explored. And as you're searching for the artifacts, there's flora and fauna samples that are photographed and added to your journal. But in place of a traditional point-based reward system, the player accumulates items while searching for archaeological findings. And the goal of this is going to be that the more connections made with the community, the more items that are found and documented, the more social capital is rewarded and trust with community partners. And so some of the design choices behind this, one obviously is trying to use the Mola artwork of the area as part of the aesthetic choices. Within the style of the game, because we decided that we have done many iterations of this. We have started with very realistic graphics that require a lot of rendering capabilities, which did not seem very useful when you're going to be trying to share this with people in the Darien region. And so we've kind of taken it down to working with more low poly assets at the moment. Also, a lot of the features are generating as you get close to them to optimize file sizes. We also use satellite-based height maps to create the terrain. So the terrain that the Y value, I'll say, of the terrain is pretty accurate as much as you can get, so that you are navigating kind of that aspect of the area. And one of the other things that was really challenging with this is that the Darien is a pretty large area. So trying to figure out, we can't necessarily walk through all of it. So we've had to condense some things. We've had to make a lot of choices about what information we're going to share. Are there some artifacts that are found sort of a little further inland from this area? Are those things that are worth finding within the game because they're important things that are still talking about the community and the culture, even if the location is not quite specific. So all things we are still exploring. But one of the big iterations that we're working on, and it's not in the current build, but is we're really trying to develop kind of community events as really important parts that navigate you through the story. So that you are having to create relationships with the local communities as you move through. And then the last piece of this really is all of Lucy's findings so far have not been found in formal archaeological digs. The community already finds their items while gardening, digging new wells, etc. But while academic sources use ArcGIS, it's an expensive and not a very accessible tool for everyday people. So in trying to create more of a participatory, community-supported data collection method, we've been using some open source tools and developing our own interfaces in order to use those. And one of the goals is that we'll be using the game as a way of trying to engage people in understanding the importance of finding and sharing this information as a whole, as a way of motivating local people in order to catalog the items that they are finding in their everyday lives. So this paper is just presenting the design process of how we create these educational and outreach materials on the Darien Gap. We acknowledge the importance of iterative media projects as research is ongoing. New findings can significantly change the narrative or the perception of information. These works are highlighting a history of migration, trips to visit community partners, and recent exploration of these 6 sites that were originally visited by Lene. And we continue to work with community partners to ensure that the perceptions being communicated are correct and supportive, and have made choices that are going to be accessible to as many communities as possible. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.